because he's been a guest here many a time, that I had forgotten about him today, but I've been all over Romo, and I didn't want to put him in a tricky spot. He might be mad at me, so I stayed away, and I am unbelievably pleased that he joined us here to give us a word or two on Dick. Sean, nice to talk. Happy holidays. How are you today, okay?
Thank you, Christopher. I actually missed your tough stuff about Romo. Should I be upset?
No, yeah, leave it alone. Let's not go there. Yeah, I'm a little annoyed at him, but as it turns out, you might have the last laugh. That's worked out well. Listen, you've done a tremendous job with Enberg, too. You brought him back to CBS. Let's get into that first, Sean. That was an ingenious move there a few years ago for the Open. Give me some thoughts there first. Go ahead.
You know, when I got the NFL, Christopher, one of my goals was to try to figure out a way to bring Dick Enberg over from NBC. NBC obviously lost the NFL. We picked it up. So that was one of my goals, and I thought, let's have a quiet meeting with Dick Enberg. About a year after we got the NFL, his contract was coming up with NBC, but I knew I couldn't meet with him in a public location. I couldn't meet him in a restaurant or a bar, so I said to him, Dick, come over to the Parker Meridian Hotel, and there's a room under the name of Mr. Nafoli, Nafoli, Mr. Nafoli, and I'll be waiting upstairs in the room. Very mysterious. Dick goes to the front desk. Mr. Nafoli's room, please. Yes, it's room 405. He comes upstairs. We have a great talk. Tony Petitti, who's my number 2 guy at the time, and I convince him that when his contract is up at NBC, he's going to come over and do the number 2 game for CBS. Loved it. Walking out the door, he said to me, Sean, who's Mr. Nafoli? And I said to him, Dick, just take out the vowels. Take out the vowels, and it spells NFL.
Wow, Sean, that's a good one. What did he say? I love it. That's phenomenal. Now, how about bringing him back for the tennis? You did that a couple times, too. Give me some thoughts about that for a second with CBS with the U.S. Open.
Same thing. I worked with Dick. You know, I was at NBC for 9 years, and I worked with Dick on NFL football. I worked with him on Wimbledon. I worked with him on college basketball. And when we got him over there, I said, Dick, one of the things you're going to do for us is U.S. Open. There's nobody who is a better play-by-play man in tennis than Dick Enberg. And I heard Billy Packer earlier today, before you were taking shots at Romo, by the way, Billy Packer earlier today talking about all the great play-by-play men in the industry and who they had worked with, and he started going through all the people that Dick had worked with: Billy Packer, John McEnroe, Merlin Olsen, Phil Simms. And the truly great announcers make their analysts better. And one of the reasons all those guys were as good as they are is because it was Dick Enberg. And the other thing about Dick Enberg, Dog, that a lot of people forget is that he was an incredibly good writer. When I brought him over to CBS, I also said to him, Dick, I'm going to sign you to the Masters. I'm going to sign you to the Final Four. Not to do play-by-play, but to write essays. And his essays were some of the most amazingly poignant pieces ever on television. So I was sad this morning when I got the alert at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I was sad for a number of reasons, one of which was, of all the guys I've worked with, and I've been lucky to work with a lot of great broadcasters, I also grew up with a great broadcasters. You know, my dad was Jim McKay.
Oh, I sure do. Yep.
Dick Enberg was as close to Jim McKay as any announcer I've ever worked with. And I heard Mike Weissman talk about how he treated the crew. Dick Enberg treated the production assistants the exact same way he treated the president of the network, with respect, with affection, and he loved the crew. And Michael Weissman was absolutely right. You had cameramen, you had audio man, you had technicians who, if you said to them, name the one announcer you want to do a show for, it would have been Dick Enberg. So I just think he leaves an incredible legacy, and it's a really sad day for all of us who are in this business, and all of us who grew up as fans. I mean, who doesn't remember Dick Enberg and Merlin Olsen? I mean, just all time. And the greatest trio maybe ever in the history of broadcasting, Dick Enberg, Billy Packer, and Al McGuire. It does not get any better than that.
100%, Sean. How hard is it as an executive to work with a broadcaster old and maybe on his way out? You didn't have to do that necessarily, but the folks who work with Gowdy did. That's a very tricky scenario. You saw it probably with your dad. How hard is it for a guy like you to work in a situation like that? Tell me thoughts about that for a sec. Go ahead.
It's a little challenging, Christopher, because most announcers would rather go out a year or two late than a year or too early. I've been really lucky. Dick Enberg came to me when his contract was up, and he said, Sean, I've got a great opportunity to work for the San Diego Padres. That's what I want to do. The NFL game's getting kind of fast for me, quite frankly. Baseball's more my speed. If you don't mind, I'm going to leave CBS and go work for the Padres. And I said, Dick, I wish you the best of luck. It's a great transition. So that saved me from having to maybe ask him not to come back. I just went through an experience with Vern Lundquist, who, as you know, one of the premier broadcasters of all time and one of the best college football producers. I had to have a tough conversation with Vern at last year's Masters, and I said, Vern, you're still at the top of your game. You're still a great college broadcaster. You and Gary Danielson are great. I think the time, quite frankly, for you is to go out on top. I'd rather have you go out a year early than a year later. And he said, you know something, Sean? I want to do that. I want people to know it's my last year. I want a victory lap. I want it to be done. Unfortunately, it isn't always that easy. Kurt Gowdy, love him, legend in the industry. Maybe it stayed a year too long. It's really tough to find people who want to go out and top. My dad was lucky in that the folks at ABC Sports said, Jim, you're not going to do play-by-play anymore, but you're going to write essays. We want you to do essays for the Olympics. We want you to do essays for the Triple Crown. We want essays on our golf coverage. So my dad was able to transition away from play-by-play and do something he could do literally until the time he died, which was to write good features and voice them over. So it's always tricky. It's one of the more difficult things we do in our job. But if you're lucky, you get a transition like we had with Vern Lundquist and like we had with Dick Enberg.
Sean, how hard is it to be in the Hall of Fame in three sports, as Enberg is? NBA, basketball, football, Roselle Award, and the Ford Frick. A second or two on that if you can. Please, go ahead.
It's really unheard of. There are people who are known for being great NFL announcers, people who are great as basketball announcers, but to find somebody who is so good at all three is really unusual. I will give some props to Jim Nantz, who's the only person in the industry who in the span of 4 months did the Super Bowl, the Final Four, and the Masters. So I'll put Jim up in that category with Dick Enberg. But Dick set the standard. And the other thing that was just amazing about Dick was his memory. He would remember people on the crew. He would remember the audio man. He would remember the stats guy. Nobody remembered people like Dick Enberg. I'll tell you one last story because I know you're running up against a break. First year Wimbledon, 1983. I'm a new kid at NBC Sports. I introduced myself to Dick Enberg. He says, Sean, come with me. Showed me the locker room, showed me the royal box, showed me the broadcast, took me around for an hour around Wimbledon and said, Sean, this is one of the cathedrals of sports. When I look back on my life, and I think it's some of the cool things I've had, to have Dick Enberg give me the insider's Cook's tour of Wimbledon, which he didn't need to do. He did it because I was the new kid on the block, is something that I'll always remember.
Sean, I appreciate a few minutes. You have a happy holiday, and I'll keep in touch. What a great job you did. Thank you very much, pal.
Thank you, Christopher. I love you.
Take care. Sean McManus. Well, give Eddie Erickson all the credit. That is a sports talk show today. Enjoy your holiday. I'll see you Tuesday.